Alright, so, chapter 18. This is starting a new mini kind of chapter. So realize that really the first, from chapter 14 and 15 was really talking about fiscal policy, which is the government's way of trying to fix the macroeconomy. Now, the other big player in the macroeconomy is the one who takes care of the money in our system, which is not the federal government, right? The federal government takes care of spending and taxing, but the people who take care of our money, our actual dollar bills, the government actually doesn't have its hands on that. That's the Federal Reserve Board, somebody else. So, chapter 18 is all about these three things. And you have to say them the right way. You have to say them. Money, 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 money! Money! Right? That's what money's all about, right?
But you said money 6 times growth rate.
Each one counts for more than one. Alright, so we need to discuss money, because that's the other way that we worry about or deal with our, macroeconomy. That's money to some degree. So before we start diving into how do we take care of our money, how do we manage it, how do we measure it, we kind of have to get a definition. Well, money, in order for something to be money, it's got to do 3 things. If it doesn't do these 3 things, folks, it's not money, it's something else. Okay? So one of the things that you have to be able to do is discern between stuff that you might think is money and stuff that turns out is not really money. Alright? Alright, so the first thing that money must do and I'm going to give you the book definitions for these things and then give you the real one, right, first, second. So these first, right? So it must be a medium of exchange. What does it mean to be a medium of exchange? People will take it in exchange for other stuff, right? The whole point of money is that you can use it to go to the store and buy shirts, shoes, hats, what have you, okay? So the other thing that money has to do is it must be a unit of account. And what a unit of account means is that it's got a number on it. Or officially, it's measurable, right? So if you look at our dollar bills, right, if you measured them all with a ruler, they'd all be the same, right? So does that mean that all of our money is the same?
Yes.
Yes, here's $1. I'll trade you for one with 100 on it. Okay. Right, so you have to have some way of divvying up your money. The last thing your money has to do is to be a store of value. So it has to be able to hold its value over time and over any amount of time, okay? So in other words, if I paid you $20 at the beginning of this class, at the end of the class, would your $20 still be $20? Yes. One would hope so, exactly. All right? So these 3 things must be satisfied for everything that can be considered money. Now the key here is realizing that. Do I actually have any? Oh, I do. Wow. I haven't spent my allowance yet.
Well, it's early.
So, this is money because people will trade me other things for it. It's measurable because it's got a 20 on it. That means it's worth 20 somethings, right? Again, how do you define what that $1 is versus $20? Ooh, I don't know. All right? And if this is a $20 today, it's going to be $20 tomorrow. Now, one of the things that we talked about, chapter 13, was inflation, right? Right?
Right.
Yep. Okay. You say so.
So if I hold on to this $20 today and show up again here next year, same time, I still have this $20 bill because I'm not good at spending money. Is that $20 worth the same thing?
Still
Might not be.
$20, but it's not gonna be able to buy you as much.
It's not going to be able to buy you as much. So is my $20 really holding its value? Kind of, yes, but certainly not holding all of its value, right? So maybe you don't like the fact that your money can lose value. And so you say, wait a second, I'm not going to use these things. What am I going to use for money instead?
Gold bars.
Exactly. I could say, wait a second, I am going to wear my money on my fingers. And anytime I want to spend it, I'm just going to pull it off, melt some of it down, give it to somebody, remold it back into the ring that it is, and put it back on my finger. Could I do that? Why not? Wouldn't people take gold for payment?
Yeah, they would.
More times than not, people are perfectly happy to take gold, right? What's the problem with gold, though?
So
Or any precious metal or gem or jewel.
the market on that changes too, so
Yeah.
it fluctuates by the minute.
It fluctuates by the minute, right? Exactly. If I had 4 ounces of gold here, how much is it worth today?
4 ounces.
4 ounces of gold at $1,200 an ounce, it's worth $4,800, right? How much is gold going to be worth next year?
Hard to say. Who knows?
Who knows? Same type
It's going to
of
be worth
problem.
more.
It could potentially be worth more, right? I mean, that there's a possibility
More
that
than
this
that.
will appreciate in value, that my 4 ounces will turn into, say, $5,000 in a year, right? Maybe gold will shoot back up to its $1,300, $1,400, $1,500 an ounce again, right? And all of a sudden I'm walking around with a veritable gold mine on my finger. Pun intended. Alright, so realize that no matter what you have as money, this store of value, I like to put it in quotes, because everything has variability to its value. No matter who you're talking with or what you're talking about, anything that's money is going to have value change, right? Whether it's a dollar bill, whether it's gold gems or gold bars or silver or rubies or diamonds, what have you. Their value is changing. So the store of value, take it with a grain of salt that its value doesn't change a lot. So,
But that doesn't mean that everything's money, because it also has to be the medium of exchange.
yeah.
I mean, you can't take a gold bar and just say Woodman's and buy groceries. They will just kind of look at you weird.
They would look at you weird, but there's a good bet that if you brought in a gold bar that was heavy enough, they'd take it. I mean, if you're going to pay $1,000 for $50 worth of food,
They'd be for that.
the Woodmans wouldn't mind too much. Granted, it's not easy, right? I mean, part of it also is that all of these things have to be easily done, right? I mean, how easy is it to figure out how much gold you have on your finger, right? I mean, you have to weigh it. You walk around with a weight, a scale on your hand at all times.
Point in our
Not unless you're
ancestry, that's the way they did do it. They,
But yeah, think about it, right? I
they
mean,
used scales.
right. I mean, there was so gold. So our money. So U.S. money is definitely money. Gold is definitely money. What else is money?
Any precious commodity.
Any of those precious things, right? Precious commodities.
You
How
could
about-
actually use oil if,
Yeah, sure. Oil is perfectly.
House.
Again, though, it's difficult to determine whether or not those mediums of exchange, unit of account things actually are true. But this is how you say that something is not money. Something is not money if one of these three things is not true. That's all it takes is one. Okay? So if you say that gold cannot be a medium of exchange because people won't take it for the things that you're trying to buy, that's a reason to say gold is really not money. Okay? That's a perfectly valid argument, right? Because money, all of these things can be slightly an opinion. As long as you argue your opinion correctly, you can give a different answer than I would as long as your argument is eloquent enough, right? Alright, so. Can cattle be money?
sure.
Sure.
Could.
Well, they were often a lot of times. What's the problem with cattle?
The quality of the cattle?
If it's a cow today, is it guaranteed to be a cow in 5 years?
No.
Could be a steak in 5 years.
It could be a steak. Part of the problem with part of the problem with cattle being money is that it dies, right? So having cattle as a unit of exchange or as a monetary sum to measure what you're worth or to calculate value is difficult because that thing definitely is going to lose value at some point in time. Definitely, right? Because cows just don't live forever, right?
That's why they didn't like the barter system, because literally everything can be valuable enough as long as there was somebody that wanted it.
Oh yeah, sure.
Sand on the beach.
Right.
I mean, if there's somebody that needs sand and you have a beach, you could barter with them with that sand, and it becomes what? Money.
Good idea. Mm-hmm.
Sort of.
Sort of, right. So, are credit cards money? I mean, can you use them to buy stuff?
Yep.
Are they pretty much usable everywhere?
Yep.
Pretty close. Are they measurable?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, there's a certain amount of money that you can spend. Is it always going to be worth however much it's worth?
Yep.
No.
Why not?
Because there's a maximum on it.
Well, no. I mean, there's a dollar amount on it, right? There's a maximum dollar amount on this, right?
It's
I mean, I
different
don't-
amounts. Sometimes you have so much on it. sometimes-
Well, yeah, but this is money. It's got different
Yeah,
amounts,
you
right?
could
This
have
one's got
$10
20
in
on it.
it.
This one's only got 1 on it. They're different amounts. So is this not
Absolutely,
money?
you could reach your maximum.
Well, yeah, but this is the same with cash, right? You make,
You don't have any more in the wallet, you can't spend anymore.
yeah.
So doesn't it store
They
value?
don't take your card when you run out of money on your card. When you run out of money in your wallet, you don't have any more money in your wallet.
Credit card company could go out of business. There's that kind of thing. But reaching maximums, it's the same as having a maximum amount of dollars. That doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Because you can always just raise the rate anyways, right? So what is it about these things?
They raise and lower the interest rate on it to change
What's different
what
about
the
this
value is.
than this? Right, let's assume that I have $20 worth of debt value in my card right now that I could charge. What's the difference between these two? Why is this one money and this one not?
Because
you
you're
have
gonna
to be-
Because you
spend.
can't give it to everybody. You can't use a debit card.
No.
Well, some people won't take this either, right?
Yeah, you could go somewhere and
Right, if I go into Canada, some of the Canadian companies won't take my $20 bill. They'll say, no, switch it to a loonie. Canadian dollar, in case you didn't know.
for the loony bird.
So what's the difference between these two?
It has something to do with the interest on it, right?
That has nothing to do with the interest rate.
You don't have to pay the bill for your credit card, right?
I mean, essentially, assume that I could pay for it, because I could pay for it with this, right? But let me read you some of the things that are on this, right? This is a Series 2009. This note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. This bank card says, here's my number, blah, blah, blah. It's valid through 4/15.
Doesn't say it's legal
It
tender.
expires.
Yeah, because we would.
It expires. There's an expiration date on this thing, folks. Am I guaranteed to get this loan reapproved if on April 15th? Or April of next year?
No, I was thinking of it differently. I was thinking of a debit card.
Debit cards are money. Debit cards are money because they are directly connected to your bank account. As long as your bank account has money, that card is good, right? Most debit cards don't have an official termination date. What they have is a renewal date where you have to get a new debit card, right? So if you pull out
Your money's still in the bank even though the card expired.
Exactly, right? So if you pull out your
But some debit cards are accepted as
credit
cards.
which is why there has to be a
So-
official termination date on your
I guess
debit
so.
card. But the reason that credit cards are not considered money, folks, is that there is an expiration date. Anything that has an expiration date cannot be money because it doesn't store value forever. At some point in time, you can say, no. Any money can be refused at any given time, right? I mean, just like a dollar bill can be refused, a credit card can be refused, a debit card can be refused, a check can be refused. All of those things can be refused, but in general, they are going to keep all of these things in value. It's this that sets them off. This is the one that tends to kill most things being considered money, is that they expire, right? And that's kind of why cattle, some people will argue that cattle is a really bad form of money. And the reason why is because if you keep your cattle around for too long,
They'll expire.
your money will expire. That's a bad thing, okay?
But just to clarify that U.S.-Canadian dilemma,
Yeah.
U.S. money is taken everywhere because it is a
Mostly.
black market item.
Oh, yeah, true.
Even in places that, like, say, North Korea,
Oh, yeah.
you can't go and trade money with North Korea.
Right.
Period. It's not happening. But there's a black market there. Will accept your American money for their items.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. I've been in, I've spent U.S. dollars in lots of bizarre places, right? First trip I ever took overseas was to Turkey, Istanbul, and there were some dark corner alleys where you'd be like, well, I've got, 4 million lira, but I've also got a $20 bill, and they're like, ooh. As soon as I said I had a $20 bill, the guys in the stalls that were selling stuff were out like, showing me stuff, just random things, didn't matter, right? And when they realized that it was my wife who was 2 people over, then the guys with the scarves and the dresses and the, and the makeup and the gold, they were over me like, oh, it was.
You can probably get twice as much.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, but but at the same time though, they were like, well, their exchange rate when I was buying things was not very good. Because they looked at me and said, oh, you're a stupid American. So
Couldn't you argue though that even U.S. money, like the $20 bill, on a long enough timeline, it will degrade since it's an organic product.
yeah,
So if you put it on a long enough timeline, it's not money anymore.
you could make that argument if you wanted to. It's a valid argument to make, and you could say that over 20 years, the value of that $20 bill will be worth so much less that it's really not storing its value because inflation is so bad in this country. You can make lots of arguments, again, as long as you're giving it a solid argument. I'm okay with you saying you don't believe that the U.S. dollar is real money. That's okay. Maybe we should use monopoly money, which is made out of plastic, which will last longer. Right? Sure. Of course, it's a little bit easier to count if they print that way. All right, so the other thing that money does need to be, just so that you know, or at least a little bit, it does need to be at least slightly scarce. And again, scarce is a sort of an odd term, but there can't be, so much of your item out there in the world that anybody could just walk around and pick it up and use it, right? So things like blades of grass, sand, leaves off of a tree, all of those sorts of things, there's so many of them out there that it really wouldn't work to make it money. It's not. It doesn't have to be a function of it, but it is sort of a trait of money that really does need to exist. So,
And yet, depending on who you're trying to sell your item to, it could be worth a lot.
yeah, I completely agree. Extra credit. How many dollars are in circulation? physically.
Like $1 bills or like dollars?
Dollars total. Actual physical cash monies. Don't forget the change. Include that. Right, so add up how much money is there physically. How many dollar bills, how many pennies, how many nickels, how many quarters, how many dimes, how many half dollars, how many silver dollars, how many Susan B. Anthony dollars, how many Sacagawea dollars, how many, all the different types of currency. So find them out, add them up. How much is it? Okay, that's always a fun one to do. Again, do not find that from some random website. Please use a .gov site. All right, now. Money can take two different forms. Commodity money is, guess what kind of money that is? That's money that also is a commodity, right? Money that serves a purpose other than money. So things like gold, it can be considered money from most people's arguments, but at the same time it also serves as jewelry, right? It serves as a means to line your cake when you're retiring from a really fancy office, right? Gold-plated cake. You ever had it? Have you ever drank Goldschlager?
Little flakes of gold.
Little flakes of gold in there, folks. You're drinking it.
It passes.
Yeah.
I swallowed a bunch of money once.
I don't want to know.
Change.
So, commodity money is any money that has served a purpose other than money, or can be directly exchanged for a commodity. So our money, our U.S. currency, used to be commodity money. It used to be that our money, you could walk to any of the Federal Reserve banks and exchange however much money you wanted for gold or silver or precious gems or jewels inside of the U.S. Treasury vault. You could do it, right? Do you guys, silverbacks, you heard that phrase before? Right? Our money used to be backed by silver. And you could go in and say, here's a silverback dollar or $10 bill. Most of them were $10 bills. And literally the government would have to, by law, exchange $10 worth of silver for your $10 bill. And the idea was that the government couldn't print more money than the actual physical items that they had worth of that money. The nice thing about that is it gave you a fixed amount of money in the system, period, right? The government couldn't print anymore unless they went and got more silver or gold or platinum or gems or jewels or whatever. But until they did that, you couldn't print any more money. So once the government had printed all the money, good to go.
So why wouldn't today's money be considered commodity money? I mean, you can go to a jeweler and buy gold with cash.
But it's not held by the U.S. government.
Oh.
That's the difference.
They do have gold that's held, but it's not like backing our money at all.
It's not backing our money, and there's not much of it either.
And there's not.
The other type of money that you can get, and this is the more common, in fact, almost all of it, is fiat money. This is in fact, I did a search yesterday looking for other countries that had money other than fiat money, and there are none that I could find, doing a quick Google search. It used to be that almost everyone's initial money as their country was being developed was based off of some commodity, right? So in other words, when England first became a country, what they did was they said, look, we're going to print money, but all of our money is tied to the amount of gold and gems in our national vault, right? And the reason they did that was because when you're first starting out as a country, what do all the other countries that have been around forever do when they look at you?
try to take you over.
Try to take you over, or they don't trust you, right? They don't trust that you're worth as much as you say you are, right? So imagine the U.S. government when it first was created. What did France, Germany, Belgium, all the European countries think of us when we first developed our U.S. country?
What a joke.
They were like, yeah, you're still owned by the English. I mean, you say you're free, and maybe you beat them in a few wars, but it's just going to be 4 or 5 years from now, and they're just going to take you back over again. So if the U.S. government had printed money, a whole ton of it, right after we became a country, what would have everybody done with that money?
Burned it.
Wiped it.
Yeah, they would have been like, this isn't worth the paper you printed it on. Because we're not established yet, right? So what most countries do when they start is create commodity money. Money that's based off of some fixed asset. That if they buy something from you, you can take that money back to them and say, hey, I like your country and all, but I want my $10 in gold off of you, or whatever unit of a currency they were using, right? Whether it's liras or yen or euros or whatever the hell you want to call it, right? So this is the way most people's money starts. Now, fiat money,
It's money for cars.
this is money that's backed by the law and nothing else. The only reason that our money is worth anything is because we believe. That straight up, folks. I mean, the only reason this money is worth anything.
We live in
Doesn't it only cost like 3 cents to make a dollar bill, no matter what denomination it is?
Yeah, this is really worth only 3 cents worth of paper and ink. But what it says, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. The U.S. government writes that on every bill, to tell you that this bill is not worth any actual commodity. It's just worth the $20 that they say it is because they say it is. And because
We believe it.
we believe, right? So anybody who tells you they have lost faith in the United States, demand that you give them, that they give you all of their money. Because the only reason this is worth anything is because you still believe. If you don't believe, you shouldn't be carrying this crap around. It's only worth 3 cents.
So this is Neverland.
Yeah. Yeah. So it has to be money because the government says it is. And if you don't believe the government, then you should not be carrying money around at all. Alright?
Okay, Marshall, you went out and looked to see if anybody had fiat money, but how many of them actually covered their circulation of money with commodity?
Nobody does.
So it's not.
Yeah, there is no. The last country that had commodity money was England, folks, and they stopped it in about 1940.
Well, see, Queen doesn't have any money herself.
But yeah, unfortunately or fortunately, again, it's not a good or a bad thing. Why is fiat money better than commodity money?
Because then you can make an unlimited amount.
Yeah, you can print as much as you want, right? As long as people believe, it's perfectly okay. So why is commodity money better, though?
Because
And the law enforces the
something to back it
debt
up.
rather than the bank.
Right. It's got something that is tied directly to. You know what it's worth. You know there can't be more of it out there than this big huge pile of gold and gems sitting somewhere, right? You're guaranteed of its worth. Here, the only reason it has any worth is because people keep believing. As soon as people quit believing, your money starts to become worth less and less and less. I mean, that's just all there is to it. Because our money is not tied to anything real. Good or bad, I don't know. All I know is that's the way it is. Alright, so, let me make sure I don't skip anything here. Okay, so now that we've sort of defined what money is and given you what our money is, again, right, money because we believe. And if you really believe really hard, will your money be worth more?
Not unless the law says otherwise.
Yeah, unfortunately the law kind of dictates how much it's worth to some degree. Alright, so, So who takes care of our money? The first answer that you must know to this. It is not the government. The government does not control our money in any way, shape, or form. They gave that right away. Federal Reserve is what controls our money supply, folks. The entity that takes care of our currency is the Federal Reserve, and it was created in 1913 by Woodrow Wilson. I would like you to know that, because it's important, so that you have a basis for what our money is historically started in. 1913, that's when the Federal Reserve that currently exists started. Realize that prior to 1913, twice the U.S. government had started a Federal Reserve or a U.S. bank. Both of those times, they failed. We dissolved it as a country. Both of the times that those banks, the U.S. banks, were created, though, the government had control of them. All right? So the government created the bank for itself in the 1800s. All right? It was only Woodrow Wilson who had the wisdom or the stupidity, whichever one you want to call it, to create a Federal Reserve System that was outside of the government's control. Right? Created as a private entity. So what Woodrow Wilson did, and think about a president in current day and age doing it, right? So imagine, if you will, 1913, prior to 1913, the U.S. government had the right to print money as much as it wanted, whatever it wanted. It had the power to print money. Woodrow Wilson gave that power away. He gave it away, folks. Can you imagine George Bush, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama
He didn't get reelected.
giving away power? No. Right? Can you imagine Congress or the Senate validating this law to give away that power? Again, no chance in hell. Okay? Now, the reason why this happened, folks, done to alleviate bank panics from 1890 to 1910. So for 20 years prior to when Woodrow Wilson was president, the U.S. was having an alarming rate of banks that were failing. Right? Basically what happened is that between 1890 and 1910, 25% of all banks had failed. So any of them that existed or were created prior to 1890 or even up until 1910, 25% of them had failed since that particular time. And when a bank failed in the 1800s or the early 1900s, guess how it failed? So imagine, if you will, you deposit your money in the bank, put in $1,000 or whatever, and you went home, did your chores or whatever your chores were back in the 1900s, and all of a sudden then you learn the next day that the bank failed.
Somebody robbed it.
Somebody potentially robbed it, or what really happened was that the bank president or the bank owner
Kept your money.
decided that he couldn't pay off his debts because he was borrowing money to run the bank, and said, oh, well, I can't afford to pay my employees, I can't afford to pay off any of my debts, I'm going to take whatever money is left in the cash and run. 25% of every bank had that happen. This wasn't them getting robbed and losing all of their money. This was the bank presidents leaving with all of the money in the vault and just disappearing.
This was them being legally robbed.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was illegal.
Yeah, they
Except
couldn't
it was
be
legal.
prosecuted because
Right.
the amount of money that they were taking couldn't satisfy the debt that they owed anyway, so they couldn't legally.
Yeah, they weren't robbing anything because all that money was owed to someone else.
Right.
All they were doing was saying, we give up, we can't pay these debts, we foreclose on ourselves. oh, by the way, any money that's left over is mine because I was the one who owned the bank anyway, so. But of course, this is the 1900s, right? So if you walk off with somebody's money, what are they going to do when they find you?
Shoot you?
Oh, yeah.
You bet you bet your butt they shoot you, and you deserve it. And are you
People heard about it,
prosecuted?
there would be a bank run, which they would.
People would
People
run to
would
the
try to
bank,
run to the bank, get their money
pull all
out
their money out, and
before
if,
the president took off.
and if the so imagine if that happens. Right? Imagine if a bank, all the people who
He's
deposit
trying to
money.
lock the door. Well, 1,000 people are trying to get in.
Right, and the reason why would banks not have all of their money sitting in the vault?
Because they got it loaned
Then loan it out to
out.
other people.
Exactly, right? The whole point of a bank, right, is to take in deposits and then say, oh, you need, $10,000 to build a house back in 1900. We're like, okay, Kedrick, you're worth 10 grand. No problem. I'll loan you $10,000. But that $10,000 is, Kiana's and mine and Matt's and Colin's and Vince's and there. We all deposited $1,000 into the bank. The bank said, oh, I'll take the $10,000 you guys gave us and give it to Kedrick. Kedrick will go out, build his house, and what will you do monthly? Pay it back, right? Because you pay your mortgage, because he's a good man. He's a farmer, he's hard-working, making sure he's getting good return on his money, so the bank gets its interest, and the bank can then pay all of us our interest on our money that we're depositing in there, right? Well, what happens if Kedrick all of a sudden says, oh, screw this crap?
Well, then the bank's out $10,000.
The bank is out $10,000. Whose $10,000 was that?
Everyone else's. Not the bank's.
It's everybody else.
What am I going to start doing? That's right, you better not find me. Because, of course, the bank president at that stage points at the people who are not paying their debts and says, well, it's his fault.
That guy, go shoot him.
Yeah, exactly. Don't shoot me, shoot him. Right? But that's how banks work, right? Is that they have to they get money in deposits, but then they lend it out to other people, and we, as depositors, have to kind of agree that we're not all at the same time going to go to the bank and say, give us all of our money back. That's what a bank run is when we go in to pull all of our money, and the bank doesn't have it all because, of course...
So why was that going to solve the problem?
Why did that solve the problem? Why was this
I don't
gonna
think
solve
it
the
did,
problem?
but why did they think it was?
Oh, it did. It did, a little bit. So the bank failure rate after 1910...
Not until they guaranteed the deposits did it actually.
Well, true. It also cost a bank money to be a member of the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, but they didn't guarantee the money right away.
No, yeah, the FDIC wasn't created until the 60s. So there wasn't any deposit. Basically what it was creating bank security. The idea was that if a bank was a member of the Federal Reserve System and all 10 of us who had deposited $1,000 in the bank, we all went to the bank at the same time and demanded our $1,000 back, and the bank only had $4,000 or $5,000 in its vault. They could call the Fed, and the Federal Reserve would say, oh, we can get you your money even though it's in Kedrick's home right now. It's just going to take us a while, right? And so what it did was it stopped at least the bank panics, right? Because if a bank was a Federal Reserve bank, then it was
Just basically gave people more confidence
More
in
confidence
the
in the
banking
banking
system
system.
because the
Absolutely.
government wasn't taking care of it.
The other thing that you can note, folks, any bank that has the word national in its name, member of the Federal Reserve Board. That was one of the conditions that the Fed said when you created your own bank. If you became backed by the Federal Reserve, you put the word national in your name, right? So First National Bank, there's a Fed-backed bank. Banks that didn't have the word national in it, no guarantees. Most of them weren't, right? So First Federal, not backed by the Fed. That was a bank just because it was a bank, right?
And they decided to call themselves back.
Yeah, they just called federal to make it sound like they were national, so that people would think it was national, but then they didn't have to pay the banking fees, right? Because the Fed charged banks money to be members. It wasn't a lot, but still a substantial sum to some degree.
So what did the FDIC do to make so
Well, we'll get to the FDIC, but the FDIC was just a commission that was basically an insurance policy. So what the FDIC said was that if you are a member of the Federal Reserve System, anytime you put in a deposit, you have to put a certain amount of money into the FDIC, so that if you're robbed or if you have a financial crisis, this company or this agency will come in and pay people's deposits out of their funds instead of out of your bank funds.
Yeah, because even before, even after they did that, before they had an FDIC, there were bank runs where people came in to get their money out, and when the bank ran out of money, if you were last in line, you probably didn't get your money back.
Not right away. Again, this is also banks, if you read the fine print of most banks, they have the right to close their windows at any given time.
Yeah.
So if they're out of cash, they can say, I'm sorry, we're out of cash, we are now closed. Banks all have the right to do that. And you can't force your way in to demand your money. You have to wait. There's always been a grace period built into these banking industries that you just have to deal with. Again, it's also a way of trying to generate security and whatnot. All right, so this was the biggest thing, right? Private entity, they gave the power to print money away. Fed now has that power. They did build a couple of caveats in it, right? The Fed does have to report to the Congress twice a year. So Ben Bernanke, or in this case Janet Yellen, twice a year they got to go up to a congressional committee and report what they did. Now they don't have to validate anything that they're doing. This is not a discussion that's going on. This is just the Fed going in and telling Congress, this is what we did. Now Congress can get bitchy about it, but the Fed can kind of just look at them and go, okay.
Need a tissue.
Yeah, exactly. Cry me a river. Which is kind of cool. And really, if you've watched some of the reports, Alan Greenspan, who was the longtime Fed during the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, prior to Ben Bernanke, he used to go into Congress and basically tell them, this is what I'm doing, shut up and listen, this is how it works. I don't want to hear a word coming out of you, just listen. And if you understand it, and you have a question about what the results are going to be, great, let's have a discussion. If you don't, shut up. Alan Greenspan he was a really nice guy. He was also really smart and he was a jerk.
He made it
But
work.
he was smart and he knew how to make Congress shut up. Right? Because anytime they asked a question, he just basically read them the Economic Riot Act. It was great. He would just sit there and talk at them for hours about economic policy. It's like, if you ask, I'm going to let you know. So if you guys want to have me lecture for hours and hours and hours on end, you can ask me about Federal Reserve policy. Go ahead. That was Alan Greenspan's approach to reporting to Congress twice a year.
You have to go.
He was cool, but at the same time, he was also a believer in hands-off policy, generally speaking. He wanted there to be less banking regulation. He believed that banks would regulate themselves because they wanted to have self-preservation. What Greenspan didn't realize was that banks were also greedy SOBs, and that by deregulating them, they can play games.
Shysters.
As long as you...
Criminal.
Well, they're just very, very intelligent beings who are sometimes questionable about their morals.
So they're humans.
Yeah, just like you. All right, so let's see. Let's stop right there. So we've gotten ourselves into chapter 18, but nowhere near the end. So no homework for today. Just the extra credit. Yeah. And you're more than welcome to put that into the chapter 18 homework when we get to it. Whatever. I'm good with it.